All right, we need Mishnah Brura. Everybody should have their Mishnah Brura.
Yes.
Taf, Kuf, Taf, Kuf, Taf, Zion. This is the Halacha Lamaisa. I'm going to bring in a couple of things that aren't in the Mishnah Brura that come up in later Shilas. But we will start with what we've seen before. And again, pretty much we're going to run through a lot of it and only see what the Mishnah Brura is Machadish as Halacha Lamaisa. All right, so Taf Kuf, Chav Zion. All right, so it opens with what we saw in the Tur, Yom Tov Shechal Lios Be'erev Shabbos, Lo Yivashel B'Techila L'Tzorech Shabbos, meaning you can't start cooking on Friday for Shabbos. We're going to use the this year's model, Friday for Shabbos, the Kedera Bifnei Atzma. You can't take a pot on Friday and put up a pot of soup or cholent for Shabbos. Aval mevashalu kama kederos liyom tov, but you could put up a couple of pots of soup for Yom Tov. V'imhotir hotir l'Shabbos. Leftovers you're allowed to use for Shabbos. That's regular. Valyadei eruv mevashal b'tfila l'Shabbos. If you have an Eruv Tavshilin, then you can cook milakatchila for Shabbos. Let us see Ot Gimel. We're not going to do every Mishnah Brura. We're going to just see some of them. Ot Gimel. Valyadei eruv mevashal b'tfila. Kosva poskim. The heter ha'eruv, if you remember, there were two reasons why the eruv allowed you to cook. Hu aflaman di'amar de melecha Shabbos ein nase b'yom tov. In other words, there is a shita that holds that meleches Shabbos can be done in Yom Tov because it's kedusha achas, and you can cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Okay, but and therefore the only reason for the eruv is so that you don't go to cook on Yom Tov lechavero. But what about the Mandi Amar who holds that Meleches Shabbos ein nasim b'Yom Tov, that there's an Isser D'Oraisa cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos? Mikol Makom Mahani HaEruv. How? The Mikol Makom ein kan el Isser midivrei Sofrim. Why? Because we solved the D'Oraisa problem with Hoil. V'ilu mikloi orchim v'chazi le'liyom Tov gufa im kein ein osa Isser b'zeh barak midirabbanan asru. And therefore, ubishvil Shabbos shehu shas hadechak itira yidei eruv. So the oraisa you can rely on hoel as long as you start cooking early enough. The Rabbanan didn't want you to do that stam, but they made an issue the Rabbanan to do that, to cook from Yom Tov, to rely on that. But they said, well, but if you do an eruv, then you could. Yidei eruv nechshav b'zeh ki'ilu kvar hitchil ha'achin me'erev Yom Tov l'Shabbos. All right, we didn't see the Hagah yet. Okay, that's us. Yizoher lahaktim hachanas ma'achalav l'Shabbos bichdei sheyigmor melachto be'od yom gadol. The samuch l'chashecha mizman delo shayich sheyitztarek lo b'yom tov gufa. Hello, yeshkan l'sa the meleches d'oraisa. It's a kind of an aleches d'oraisa, and therefore you have to start early enough to allow for the whole likloi or orchid. V'chein yesh lizaher b'hama'achalim shehitmin l'Shabbos sheyatmin mizman she'efsher sheyizbash l'shlish. Okay, I don't think we do that so much. We don't cook with hatmana so much because when it comes in nagu lahaktim tfilas arvis belil Shabbos kishachal somuch liyom tov. Interesting. In other words, the idea of an early Shabbos that is controversial a little bit, and yes and no. And there's a shaila, can I do an early Shabbos this year and cut off from Yom Tov of Shavuos? But he's saying it's a good idea to do it because that way you're for sure not going to do any cooking too close to Shabbos that you don't have the hoil. Okay, ad samach lachashecha v'ayin bir halacha de b'shas atchak yesh lahakel b'Yom Tov sheni. Shechal be'erev Shabbos, imnis acher bishulo l'Shabbos. This is for our chutzlaretz people. That since Yom Tov Sheni really is only midirabanan, so therefore b'di'eved, if you're doing it very close and there isn't really a hoil, b'di'eved you can still do it. Ad samach l'Shabbos, v'at b'Yom Tov Rishon, efshar liyesh lahakel b'shas adchak, u'lekachila bevarei tzarich lizar b'zeh b'frat b'Yom Tov Rishon shu de'oraisa, that one should certainly make every effort to finish your cooking with enough time for a hoel. Let's just see the Hagah.
Rabbi, could I just ask one thing about on Erev Shabbos, putting, he says here, Sheyatmin Bisman She'efsha Shidbashel Shlish Bishul Bimbaot Yom.
They did hatmana in a day. What we do hatmana is not what they did. They did hatmana in order to make it cook. They were matmin it raw.
I know, but I know, obviously. But I'm talking like, let's say you want to have your soup for Friday night. So your soup for Friday night, my understanding was at least that your soup for Friday night should be hot when it goes on the platter.
Yes.
Right.
That's the ideal. Yes.
So if that's
part of the whole. That's part of the whole.
Right.
Okay.
So that maybe that's what he means here.
Okay. Again, let's leave the hatmana part out. Okay. And we'll just the soup everything needs to be edible on Yom Tov in order for you to rely on the eruv. Yes.
Right.
Okay. So now let's just see the Haggah. Pirush inyan ha'eruv hu sheyivashel v'yefa miyom tov l'Shabbos imasha bishel ha'afar kvar me'erev Yom Tov l'shem Shabbos. That way, when what you're doing is that you're cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos as a continuation of what you started before Yom Tov for Shabbos. Okay? V'nimtza shelo hitchil melecha b'Yom Tov elagomar also. Okay? And that is what the Haggah mentions. Okay. We'll skip the rest of this Haggah and go to Beis. Eruv ze osin oso bepat v'tavshil. V'im lo oso ela betavshil levad muter. Remember, we saw that according to most opinions, the tavshil works for both tavshil and pat, but pat does not work for tavshil. Okay, so ot hey in the Mishnah Brura, ot hey, the pat v'tavshil, the tzarch lefos levashil miyom tov l'Shabbos. You want to be able to both cook and bake from Yom Tov to Shabbos. V'lachein osin ha'eruv mipat v'tavshil me'erev Yom Tov shal smach ze ofen umevashlim achar kach. In theory, if nobody was going to do any kind of baking, maybe there you only need a tavshil, and especially since the tavshil also works. But again, the minhag the minhag for centuries is to do both tavshil and pat. But osvav. V'im lo asa'u ela mitavshil levad, the meikar adin ain't tzarich ela mitavshil levad, umahani bein lepat bein letavshil, as we saw in the Rishon. Shekenu das rova poskim, el shenoagu kedas poskim, hamachmirin atzarich pat v'tavshil v'lachim b'di'evet muter, meaning muter if you only did a tavshil. V'im ain't tzarich le'efod b'yom tov, rach levashu, then aflekachil l'sagi v'tavshil l'chud, l'chule alma. If you know for sure that you're not going to have to do any baking, tavshil alone is enough. Yes, David.
About lighting candles for Shabbos?
Wait. We're going to get there. We will definitely get there. Okay. Now we will do, so what did it say? It said that in lo asu ela betavshil muter zayin. Okay, I'm going to skip zayin. We're going to go to Steve Gimel. Again, I'm not going to be doing all the Mishnah Brewers because we want to get through everything and know what's lamaisa for us. Okay, Gimel. Shir hatavshil zeh kezayis bein le'echad bein la'alofim bein b'katchila bein b'sofo v'yesh matzrichim l'katchila papas kebeitza v'chein noagim l'katchila. So it's interesting. In other words, you don't want to take just a kezayis, which is really a very, very small piece, but you want to have a kebeitza ideally. Says the Mishnah Berurah chet kezayis umshum hider mitzvah yikach lechem sholem v'chatichas basar adagim chshuva. So there is an issue here of hidur mitzvah. Since the Eruv Tavshilin is a mitzvah, you want to take something nice. All right. So you certainly, if you use matzah, you certainly want to take a whole matzah, or you should take you can take a small challah, but it should be a full shalem, a challah shlema. And again, the meat. I think that I was just thinking now that this year probably because Friday night Shabbos Yom Tov, we're going to finish the Suda probably at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 3:30 in the afternoon, and we're going to already sit down at 8:30 for the Shabbos meal. We're probably going to have salmon on Friday night, so it would be perfect to take the salmon as your Eruv Tavshilin. Even though the idea is it should be we'll see that there's an Indian to hold the matzah till Shalosh Shudas. But certainly, if you eat anything that you eat on Shabbos is already very good for the Eruv Tavshilin. And that's more chashuv than a hard-boiled egg. So I'm thinking of doing that this year. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're going to go now to Dalet. Tzorch she'abosh hatavshil zeh davar shu ro'i lelafed bo es hapat la'apuke daisa. And we're going to say, Kigon basar v'dagim u'beitzim v'sharei mina lifton mevushalim shedarkan lelafed bo es hapas. That's Yud Aleph. Maharil hayaminiach habasar al teller or below al gluska mishumius. You got to make sure that it's nice, that you're going to eat it. V'gam lokach lechem shalem. Also, here's a halacha lemaisa, which has become a very common minhag. All right, and that is v'hayalokech also acharkach lechem mishnah, meaning you made a challah or a matzah, and you have lechem mishnah 3 times on Shabbos. So what he did is each time he used that as one of the 2 lechem mishnahs, ubotzei alav b'suda shlishis, and he kept it shalem on the first 2 meals so that he could use it for each meal, since it's a cheftzah shel mitzvah. There was an Indian to make it available as your lechem mishnah, and then on Shalosh Shudas, he actually used it to eat it. The kibbutz is ave be mitzvah chada, this ave be mitzvah sachrina. It's a nice minhag. I don't know how many of you do that. I know we used to do that. Anybody know how you guys did it? Those of you who did it at home, or if you don't now, you do it. It's a nice thing to do, to take especially if you use a matzah. Okay, you take the matzah as your lechem mishnah each time, and then for Shalosh Shudas, you actually use it to eat it. Okay. Let's go to Vav. Okay. No, I'm sorry. No, I have marked here to go to Hey. Yeah, go to Hey. Okay. Tavshil zeh she'amru afilu tzli afilu sholok afilu kavush o meushan afilu mindagim ketanim sheidichan b'mayim chamin v'adachasan ubishulan. Meaning, there are things that if it's pickled, if it's eaten in the way that it's been prepared, herring, let's say. I'm not sure that herring is cooked. Okay, but it's pickled in a way that's how you eat it. Harez somech alehem v'chein somech al tapuchim mivushalim, applesauce or compote. Right? We talked about that in the Rishonim. Right? Can you use compote? Vuadin shar peros mivushalim. Again, it has to be cooked. The aldagim tanim shebishlu. All of that is okay, and I don't think there's. Oh yeah, we want Yud Ches. I have marked Yud Ches. What's Yud Ches? Yeah. Tapuchim mivushalim. V'chol zeh dafka im derech oso hamokom lelafet boenes hapat. See, in Europe, they used to eat applesauce with challah, with bread. They used to eat applesauce. My father always did that. The applesauce was eaten with bread. I'm not sure now, when you bring dessert and you bring applesauce for dessert in the meal, do people eat it with challah? I mean, I do. I do because of the bracha and because we like it. But if it's not something that most people eat with bread, you should not use that for Eruv Tavshilin. Again, Lamaisa, we have it very easy. In those days, it was complicated. I didn't have everything. Today, Baruch Hashem, we have everything available. We can use fish. We can use a piece of chicken. We can use a piece of schnitzel. We can use a hard-boiled egg. We don't need to rely on the opinion of the applesauce in case people eat the applesauce with bread. Okay, question? Or we're ready to move on to Vav. Somech me'erev Yom Tov afilu al adashim shebishule kedera. You remember that halacha? V'chein al shamnunis shenidbak b'sakin v'garu v'hu sheyesh bo kazayis. What's the chiddush? Says the Mushabur in Chaf. Somech me'erev Yom Tov. It's on Oloma. Here's the chiddush. Af al pi shenisharu sham below miskavein. You were scooping it out and a little bit left. You didn't intend to leave it for Shabbos. When you cooked it, you certainly didn't intend to leave that for Shabbos. This is food you cooked for Yom Tov. Ho'il uvmi ba'od yom somach alehem. Since it's still daytime on Erev Yom Tov, remember we're on Erev Yom Tov, and you cooked it for Yom Tov, but there was some left over, you can rely on it. V'lo amrinan demigu de lo chashivi bat le'agav kedera, which is exactly the default that Rashi brought that we don't accept. Elagorin me'av Yom Tov u'mechashvin lekach ve'omer aleim be'hedein eruva. You can say all of the nusach on that left, on the little bit of stuff that was not originally cooked for Shabbos. You can designate it for Shabbos, and this is the idea of designation, that you can open up a jar of gefilte fish from the store, and which was certainly not cooked for Yom Tov for Shabbos, and you can designate it as your food that you are now preparing today for Shabbos. It's not the ideal. Again, the gefilte fish is fine, but the shamnunis that's left on the knife, that's a b'diavad. We're not talking about the beans. That's not the problem. The problem is that it was the beans at the bottom of the pot that was just left over. Dafilo and isbashlu mitchilo l'shem kach, we're going to allow you to use it. He's also adding another point. Some people may not eat beans with bread. Okay, I don't know. We have baked beans. Anybody eat baked? We know we eat baked beans with our hot dogs. Do you eat baked beans with bread? If you're just eating some baked beans, I don't think people eat baked beans with bread. Okay, so that's the point. Okay, Zion mitzvah al kol adam la'arev, mitzvah al kol gadol ha'ir la'arev al kol bnei iro, kedei sheyismoch alav misheshachach o nenas o sheiniach eruv ve'ovad. Okay, remember the guy who we had the guy who used the raw egg, and the shiloh was when he made the eruv, he was not expecting to rely on the gadol ha'ir. Okay, so he was expecting not to rely on the gadol ha'ir. Okay, and when your eruv gets lost, you were not expecting to rely on the gadol ha'ir. But it says here that you are allowed to rely on him. He can also rely on the gadol ha'ir, meaning he's doing the kachil. Look, I don't know what to do. So he's allowed to say, I'm relying on the gadol ha'ir. You know what to do, and you say, I'm too busy. Why should I do it? I'll rely on gadol ha'ir. Nikra posheya ve'eno yotze. So we'll see the Mishnah Berurah on that. Okay, because again, it's a little tricky. It was based on the Gemara of the Samya, of the blind person, on Shmuel's blind person. Okay, so says the Mishnah Berurah ot chaf. Ot chaf aleph. U'mitzvah al kol gadol ha'ir. V'chein matzina b'shas, shekama gedolei amor. And we had all the stories, right? How you medaktikim b'zeh, to make sure that they made an area for the rest of the city. V'shechach shachach an chav beis v'chol zeh b'pam rishon. One shot. Aval im beregel hasheni shachach. Od pam. Havi posheya shenikar sheinu chared lidvar mitzvah v'dino mevur b'sof ha'seif, that he's a posheya. Okay, now you got a one-shot thing. I'm assuming that one shot means, Yom Tov Pesach you forgot, and then Yom Tov Shavuos you also forgot. That's not good. If Yom Tov Pesach you forgot, and then 3 years later you forgot, that's not called a posheya, because you did it many times in the middle. Talking about, I assume it means 2 consecutive forgets. Okay, Oshehiniach, and it got lost. I mean, Chav Gimel. V'lo amrinan shebizeh she'irev. Here's the point. Here was the default. The fact that he made an eruv, he made a statement. I'm making an eruv, so I don't need the gadol ha'ir. I'm not relying on the gadol ha'ir. Shebizeh she'irev gila bedaito she'enu rotza. Let's say eruv shel gadol ha'ir. We say it's still okay. It still works. Okay. What about an eno yodei la'arev who adin im choshav she'icholim lotzei be'eruv shel gadol afilu lekachila? He made another guy. He made a mistake, right? He thought that I can lekachila rely on the eruv of a gadol ha'ir. So that's also shogeg. That's a mistake. Okay? As opposed to saying, I know that I should do it myself. I'm too busy. I'll rely on the gadol ha'ir. That's a posheya. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chav Hey, Nikra posheya, mipnei shetakanas chachamim haya shekol echad ve'echad yasalmen al Eruv Tavshilin be'atzmo. They want everybody to do an Eruv. Why? Why is it so important? Kedei sheyeh zochur. You remember, that was one of the reasons for the Eruv. If it's mutter midioraisa to cook, so why did they do it? Because they're afraid that if you cook miyom tov l'Shabbos, which you're allowed to do midioraisa, next time you may cook from yom tov to chol. And therefore, we want to make sure that you realize by doing an Eruv to permit yom tov to Shabbos, certainly you would never come to stam do yom tov l'chol. Umiu lav dafka hu be'atzmo, dehu adini mimane shliach nami de shluch shalom kemoso. V'lo bo el lapuke eruv shel gadol shemechin mitavshulav ve'eno nimlach behem b'shas asiyoso elamodiel lehem b'yom tov shasa eruv yicholim lismoch alav. So he's saying like this. He's turning this into a bit. He's basically turning this in. He's avoiding it being a mitzvah shebagufo. So you can't make a shliach to put on tefillin. All right, and we want everybody to remember that you can't cook from Yom Tov to Chol, so therefore we're going to make it complicated to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. But as long as you're making a shliach to do it, you've accomplished the goal, and therefore you can make a shliach to do it also. Okay, that's also fulfilling the requirement. Okay, but what does it say? Chavav Chavav was ve'eno yotze bo if he's a posheya. She'ena chachamim maknim eruvam lemishu yochel lasos be'atzmo v'nisatza. If you remember, we saw that Shmuel said, "I don't have you in mind anymore." V'da daharbe poskim cholkin al zeh uledidhu yochel kol odom lismach likapil al ero shegadol ha'ir ve'af hagedolim mechavnim be'eruvam lahaknos lekol odom b'chol ofen ve'eza she'eno yotze be'eruvam. זה שכל פעם עושה בעצמו, ואינו רוצה לסמוך על ערב של גדול. ואחר כך קורא ששכח כמה פעמים, ולא עושה בזה אין הגדול מציאו, שהרי לא היה דרכו לסמוך על הגדול. ואפשר בדיעבד יש לסמוך. Again, למעשה nowadays, the general consensus is that the Gadol Ha'ir has in mind everybody. Even though Shmuel said, oh, you're a posheya, I'm dafka not going to have you in mind. But nowadays, the Gadol Ha'ir has everybody in mind. That seems to be the consensus. And therefore, b'di'evid, you can rely on it. You're very busy. It's not ideal, but you can rely on it. Okay. Where are we up to that I want to see? We want to see. Okay. So let's do tests. Yeah, tests. Das meiniach ba'inan. If you're making an Eruv for somebody else, again, this is going to be very common if you have kids coming over to you, so you want to make the Eruv for them, you have to have das when you make the Eruv. I'm also making the Eruv for my guests. But when you're making it for them, they don't have to know you're making it for them, as long as you tell them later that you made it for them. But they certainly have to know that an Eruv was made before they start cooking. In other words, when your kids are coming to you for Yom Tov, I think they assume you're making the Eruv for them. And therefore, even if you don't tell them explicitly later, they can rely on the fact that you had them in mind. But you have to have them in mind. Okay, let's see Lamed Beis. Somchen alav mistama. Osan sheshachachu onensu bevade erevu be'ad kula. Avagav shelo huchras. Yesh me'achonim shurotzu lomar lididon. Shebenusach birkas Eruv Tavshilin hu lonu ulechol hadarim be'ir. It's an amazing thing. Our musach, if you pay attention in the Magzor, right? It was I always was bothered by that. My father's making an Eruv and he's talking about everybody in the city, but he wasn't the Gadol Ha'ir. Okay, but yeah, that's our nusach now. So kol mi sheshachach yochel lismoch devada irbu be'ado v'cholku aleihem she'ena nusach moel klu. Machlokas. Our nusach says kol b'nei ha'ir, but lamaisa you're not qualified to do it for the kol b'nei ha'ir. Okay, kol zeh shelo ziku lahem al yedei acher b'tavshil ukadu lakaman. Unless you explicitly did it for those people, ve'en rov b'nei adam yodim zos ve'enam makdim kla. In other words, what he's saying is like this. The only way it could work, if you want your Eruv to work for other people, is if you're mizaka the Eruv to somebody else for them. But if you're sitting at home and you take your Eruv, which many of you probably do, and you just take the Eruv and you start reading the nusach from the siddur, and you weren't mizaka it to anybody, what you said does not help for anybody except your family. And even though you said in the words, v'chol b'nei ha'ir, that could only work if you were mizaka for the b'nei ha'ir through somebody else. That's what he is saying here. Okay. Because in other words, if you're doing it for other people, you have to be mizaka for them so that they also have a part of the food that started to be cooked on Erev Yontif for Shabbos. They have to own part of that food. Okay? Question? Or we're okay? Yeah, let's see Lamed Dalid. Okay, so again, Hama'arev le'acherim, go back into Yud again. Hama'arev le'acherim tzarech lezakos lehem al yedei acher. V'kol misha mizakin al yodo be'erev Shabbos, which is Erev Chatzeros, mizakin al yodo be'erev Tavshilin, v'kol misha ein mizakin al yodo, but also Erev ein mizakin al yodo. It depends whether you're allowed to make it, whether you can use your family members or it needs to be somebody outside of your family. Right, that's the issue here. Says the Lamed Dalid. Yeah. All right, I think we'll skip that. You know what? No, let's see it. Mizaken al yaro be'erev tavshilin. Hani de ikapluta sham. Kigon beishto shomal mazonos o beno gadol shesomuch al shulchano. Shemaskin and sham de b'diavad somchin lekula. But really, you should not rely on your wife or your son that you support, because they're b'nei beso, and in theory, they could be yotze with your eruv without you doing anything. In those days, your wife had, she has her own kitchen, and you have to give her food, and she doesn't live with you, and you don't always eat together, and you give her food to cook for herself, then for sure you can be mezaka with her. She has to do her own eruv. She's not included in yours. And since migu that she's not included in your eruv, you can use her to be mezaka for other people. In other words, again, it's not so common today, but in theory, you might have such a thing, that if the wife is making her own kitchen and her own food, so on the one hand, she must make her own eruv, but on the other hand, you can be use her to be mezaka other people.
So, Rabbi Karlinsky, if I understand correctly, these categories are binary. Either you're in or you're out. Either you're enough shaykh to my household that I cannot use you to be mezaka other people, or you are far enough outside of my household that you can be considered an outsider to be mezaka to others. There's no middle ground. It's either
That's, you just described the likatchila. But there are poskim that b'diavad say that you could use your wife and you could use your son, but it's b'diavad. That's exactly the point. The lekachila is either or, but there are kulas. There are those who are makil to allow the wife and the son to be used. Okay, that's exactly the point here. Okay, so now when you are mizaka, you give it to the person that you're going to be mizaka and say, "I'm giving you the eruv to be zocha. You should be zocha for everybody else." And then Yud Beis, Choser v'noto miyara zoche umevarach al mitzvahs eruv. The Omer bedin yehi shorin lan lafuya livshule latmune uladluka shraga. You see Lamed Zayin. We're going to see about ladluk shraga ulume'eved b'kol tzarchana miyom tov l'Shabbos lana uleploni uploni, because you were mizaka for somebody. Ol chol b'nei ha'ir, if you're doing it for everybody, okay, and therefore you got to take it back and then say, I am now going to make the eruv, and you have to say the whole nusach. So what's the issue here of ladluke shraga? So says the Mishnah Brura Lamed Zayin. Ladluke shraga, that's part of the nusach of the Eruv Tavshilin. So it sounds like to light candles, light Shabbos candles for Shabbos. To light candles for Shabbos needs Eruv Tavshilin. Otherwise, why am I including it in the nusach of the Eruv Tavshilin? Yesh shekosvu gam la'apuke v'hainu hotza'a. All right, that I'm sorry. What have I got here? Yesh shekosvu gam la'apuke v'hainu hotza'a v'yu b'diavad im lo hiskiron lahani tarti. Meaning, in theory, you should have said ladluke shraga and hotza'a. Because if you're not going to make the eruv on hotza'ah, again, it's a question: do you need an eruv on hotza'ah? Well, just like I need an eruv ladluk shraga on Yom Tov for Shabbos, okay, because it's not real ochel nefesh. I should need an eruv to carry my siddur on Shabbos afternoon to shul for Shabbos. Now, again, I was as one of the participants who only listens on the recordings. So, do I need a hoil? Do I have a hoil when I carry my siddur or my talis on Friday afternoon to have it for Shabbos morning? L'chari need a hoil. Do I have a hoil? I say, of course you do. Of course you have a hoil.
There's a brit.
No, it's Shabbos afternoon. You take your talis to shul because maybe the chazan needs it. There's always a possibility that somebody will need a talis on Shabbos afternoon, as long as you get there before Shkia. And the siddur, for sure, somebody may need to daven from the siddur. So there's definitely a hoil. There's definitely a hoil on. There's definitely a hoil on both the carrying. Now the adluk leishraga gam lapuki hainu hotzaah mihu b'diavad. Here, let's just read back get back into Lamed Zayin. B'diavadim lo hiskiru lahani tarta. You didn't mention ladluk leishraga or lahotzaah. And again, in our machzorim, I don't think anybody has hotzaah in their machzor. You'll tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, l'kuli alma ein lahachmer deklalim de nichlalim b'leme'evet kol tzarchana. The nusach is, it lists all the things to cook, to bake, ulechol tzarchana. So the chol tzarchana is a global enough statement to include carrying and lighting candles. And therefore he says, b'diavad, if you didn't mention it, it still works. Okay? Okay. V'shuv mutarin kol hamelachos. We don't mention shchita in the list of things we do, right? If you think you're going to need to do shchita again, now it's not so relevant for us today, but in the old days they used to have to shecht on yonta for Shabbos. So tov lefarid behaden gam shchita. Okay. Now he's an interesting, important halacha here for everybody. I'm back into the Haggah in Yud Beis. Umisha eno yodea beloshan hakodesh. What happens if you don't understand Hebrew? You're reading it from the mouth, and you don't really understand what you're saying. Yuchal la'omer beloshan laz shemevi. You're allowed to say it in English. And I say not only you're allowed to say it in English, it's probably better to say it in English because you've got to understand what you're doing. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Umisha eno yodea beloshan hakodesh. Shari tzarich lomer shesomech al zeh. V'im eno mevin ma she'omer. Im kein lo somach aleim befiv. So he's not really relying on it because he doesn't know what he said. Okay? And therefore, mem, yochel omer beloshen zeh, kolomer tzorich loma. See, the Mishnah Berurah is sharpening the lashon of the Ramah. The Ramah makes it sound like it's okay. And the Mishnah Berurah doesn't like that. Because what do you mean it's okay? Like as if it sounds like okay, but if you don't understand it, it's also okay to say. It's okay to say in English, but you should say it in Hebrew. Says the Mishnah Berurah says no, it doesn't mean that. It means you got to say it in English. You got to understand what you're saying because you're making a statement about what you are doing and what you're relying on. Okay. Let's use Gimel. We'll talk about the candles again. We'll see what some of the later posts can say about candles today. Afal gav shiniach eruv Yud Gimel. Afal gav shiniach eruv. Eino yochel levashel miyom tov l'rishon l'Shabbos. In other words, it's not relevant now, but it was certainly relevant Pesach. So you made Eruv Tavshilin on Wednesday, and you want to cook on Thursday Yom Tov for Shabbos. That's a no-no. You're only allowed to cook with the Eruv Tavshilin on Yom Tov Friday Samach l'Shabbos, not from Thursday for Shabbos. Okay, and that is Mem Aleph. Yom Tov Rishon Pirush Yishachal Yom Tov Rishon B'Yom Hey. Again, and this is only in Chutz La'aretz, of course. De Yochol Levashel B'Yom Vav. I'm not going to have time to cook on Friday. So he says, I know I'm not going to have time on Friday, so I'm intentionally saying I'm cooking on Thursday so that I can cook on, I'm starting to cook Wednesday so that I can cook Thursday for Shabbos. That doesn't work. Lo mahani. Remember, this Eruv isn't a free pass. The Eruv has a structure, and the structure of the takana, where we're starting with the assumption, for whatever reason, you can't cook from Friday to Shabbos without an Eruv. So if you're making an Eruv, it has to conform to the structure of the takana of Eruv. Ubefrat bizmanenu sheyom tov sheni kechol midoraisa shilo haya yom chol bein time bevadai lo mahani Eruv levashel. Listen to what he's saying. In Yom Tov Sheni, so what did you do? You made an Eruv on Wednesday, and you're going to cook on Thursday. Well, that's for sure no good midoraisa because Friday's chol. And certainly no one allows you to cook on Thursday for Shabbos because there's a chol in the middle.
But when there was a 2-day Yom Tov, and it was an actual safek, so yes. Then they did presumably make the Eruv on Wednesday and cook.
No, they made it on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And cooked only on Friday. That was the takana of the Eruv. What you're asking is a different question. We saw that in the Gemara. In those days, where they had, if you forgot to do the Eruv on Wednesday, can you make the Eruv on Thursday? You remember we talked about that in the Rishonim, that you can make the Eruv on Thursday al Tanai.
Right.
Right? If today is Yom Tov, then I don't need an Eruv to cook tomorrow. And if today is Chol, then I'm making an Eruv now so that I can cook Friday for Shabbos.
Right.
Okay, but now, okay, so, but certainly no one allows you to make the Eruv on Wednesday to cook for Friday.
Robert Karlinsky.
Yeah.
So nowadays, so those people, like people who are in Chutzlarts right now, if they made an Eruv properly on Wednesday afternoon, can they cook on Thursday for Shabbos or only on Friday for Shabbos?
Wait. You're talking for Shavuos? You're talking about where this year Shavuos is Friday.
I'm sorry. Not this year. It's not relevant for them either.
Yeah.
In a year where there's 3 consecutive days, Yom Tov, Shabbos,
like there was.
They made a proper Eruv on Wednesday afternoon.
Yes.
Are they allowed to cook on the first day of Yom Tov for Shabbos?
That's exactly what he said. No, it's exactly what it says here.
That's what he's talking about.
That's exactly what it says. Let's read it again. If it wasn't clear, let's read it again. Let's redo Gimel. Afal pisheniach eruv eno yochel levashel miyom tov rishon l'Shabbos. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Ubifrad. Let's go back to let's go back into. I'm in the middle of Mem Aleph. Okay. The lo tiknu eruv ela miyom tov asamach l'Shabbos v'lo miyom shalafanav. Ubifrad bizmanenu sheyom tov ksheni kechomi deoraisa. Because nowadays, you should know that Yom Tov Rishon is a Deoraisa and Yom Tov Sheni is a Derabon. Everybody agrees with that. That's why there are certain leniencies on Yom Tov Sheni. We can be metapel with a mace, etc., etc. Okay? Okay. For example, everybody would understand that, so this year Pesach, the second days of Pesach in Chutzlas came out Wednesday, Thursday. So nobody would dream of making an Eruv on Tuesday to let me cook on Thursday for Shabbos when there's a Friday in the middle. That certainly couldn't. That certainly can never work. Okay. All right. Where are we up to? Yes, l'Shabbos. Okay. Miyom tov rishon l'Shabbos. Ubediyevet im ovar ubishel o shogag ubishel. What happens if you did? You cooked on Thursday. Friday is Yom Tov, and you cooked on Thursday for Shabbos. Das ataz lahater kidel lekamon, v'kol shekain im lo bishel macholem acherim l'Shabbos that will allow you for covered Shabbos b'di'evet to use it. Again, it's a big kula, but it's a b'di'evet. Okay, right. Okay, I think I'm going to skip Yud Daled and go to Tesvav. Nechal ha'eruv. So you made your Eruv, and now you want to cook on Friday, and you realize the Eruv is gone. Either your kid ate it or got lost. Can I cook on Friday for Shabbos after the Eruv that I made on Erev Yom Tov is gone? There has to be something left over. Says the Mishnah Brura, Tezvav is Memvav. Okay. Nechala Eruv Memvav. Nechala Eruv Eruv Tavshilin. Aval nechala pat ein mekach klum. Interesting, because really all you needed to do is make it on Tavshil. So therefore, if the pot got eaten, there's no problem as long as the Tavshil is still there. Nafilim chal yom tov biyom hey biyom vav nizkar berishon she'avar apat ein tzarich la'arev al tanai elosomech al Tavshil l'chud. He's saying even if, remember, if you didn't have an Eruv, and on Thursday you could still make an Eruv al Tanai, you don't need to do that if the Tavshil is still around. Okay? Memches is... Oh, okay, no, I didn't do it. Ted Zayin in the Shulchan Aruch. Le'achar shehechin tzarchi Shabbos. Meaning it's Friday, you finished all your cooking for Shabbos, yochel ochlo. You don't have to leave it open for Shabbos. Okay? Because you already cooked, you continued cooking on it, and now in theory you could use it. Says the Mishnah Brura, Mikol makom lekachvila nachon sheyaneach oso lelechem Mishnah be'arvis v'shachris uvemincha yivatze alav dekivan de'isavei b'mitzvah chada de'isavei b'mitzvah achrisa, as we saw before. In other words, b'di'eved, you haven't undone the cooking that you did beheter by eating the Eruv on Friday, because all the cooking was done beheter. So technically you don't need the Eruv anymore. You can eat it, but it's not an ideal thing. Certainly not an ideal thing. Okay, and therefore hitchil bisoso v'nechal eruv gomer osa isa v'hu adinim hitchil levasha gomer osa tavshil shehitchil. And if you remember, we thought we understood that the pashtus is you can finish the thing you started, but not to start something fresh. Says the Mishnah Brura Mem Tes hitchil bisoso rak lilosh gomer lafoso. Okay, osa tavshil v'afilu lo hinicha adayin eitzel ha'esh. In other words, as long as you started being involved in it, that's okay. All right, so we understood that. That again, if it gets lost, you can't start something new, although there was an opinion that said that you're allowed to keep cooking as long as you started something. Okay, there was such an opinion. I think he brings it in Nun. Where is it here?
No, it is.
Where am I here?
Also, tafshil ba'afilu lo inich adayin ela ala eish rak shehitchil ba kigon shechotak rosha. And as long as you started doing something.
Okay. All right, we're skipping Yud Ches and going to Yud Tes. Mi shalo erev, no eruv. Can I light candles on Yom Tov for Shabbos? Muter lahadlik ner shel Shabbos v'yesh osrin. Okay, here what? So Nun Dalet. Muter lahadlik, why? De lahadlakas ner ain't tzorich eruv. You don't need an eruv to light candles, okay? Because lighting candles is always usable on Yom Tov. L'deyazu ein omrim benusach hadein eruv lahadluke shraga. V'yesh osrim harbe achronim hiskimu deikr kedeyazu that it is osir to light candles without an eruv. V'lakach anu omrim benusach hadein eruv gam lahadluke shraga. The gamze niter al yedei ha'eruv ela de iminiach ha'eruv velo amar lahadluke shraga ein isra b'di'eved because memela nigra gamze the hadlakas neros because he said l'chol tzarchana avalim lo iniach klal an eruv asur ela what rakner echad muter lahadlik b'chol ofen because you could always need one candle but you can't light 6 candles on Yom Tov, because you don't need 6 candles. The only possible use you have is for one. V'yesh mekilin kedei harishona lahadlik kol ma sherotze ulekarchila nachon sheyakne leacherim v'hem yadliku lo im yistapek b'ner echad. Yistapek b'ner echad. So I'll just share with you here in the more modern postscript. Let me just see here what I have marked off here. Where is it here? Yeah, so he says like this: the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa brings it again. He gets from Shlomo Zalman. What happens if the only thing I'm going to need to do is light candles? All my cooking is done, but I will need to light candles, and I want to be Yotze, the shitas that say I need Eruv Tavshilin, but there's shitas that you don't need Eruv Tavshilin. So he says very reasonably. You got to think why it's so reasonable. Im hut sarich lahadlik neros Shabbos biyom tov ye'arev Eruv Tavshilin v'lo yivarech without a bracha. Why? Because if you make a bracha, it sounds like you were mechuyev, but there's shitas that you're not mechuyev. So therefore, safek brachas all you don't make a bracha. But you can't rely on the opinion. You don't want to rely on the opinion that says you don't need to make Eruv Tavshilin, because there's an opinion you need to make Eruv Tavshilin. So the compromise always is and these kinds of things you make Eruv Tavshilin without a bracha.
If I make an Eruv Tavshilin on Wednesday or whatever on Eruv Yom Tov, and then it turns out I don't cook, so you could say b'di'evet I wasn't mechuyav to make that, but we don't say that, right?
Right. Correct. Okay, because you intended you see, but you started your cooking on Erev Yom Tov so that you could cook. Okay, but if you know you're not going to cook, so it's not shach to start your cooking if you're not going to cook.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want to make an Erev so that I can light, but you may not need an Erev to light, and that's why you don't make a bracha.
Got it.
Okay? But he continues, Shmir Shabbos Kilchas, I'll just read you another line. If you want to, okay, this is Perak Mem Dalet, if you want to see it yourselves inside. Im shachar honenas v'lo irev me'erev Yom Tov, lo yadlik rak ner echad bilvad mi'ner Shabbos. Okay? And again, and he then writes about the possibility that if Rav Ha'ir, remember, we also have Rav Ha'ir making an Erev. So if the Rabbeim made an Eruv, then you should be able to light more candles. Okay. But again, look, it's not ideal. But there's another issue that's brought up, and that is the idea that you need a hoil. So Rav Shlomo Zalman writes, again, it's not so practical nowadays, but Rav Shlomo Zalman's ideal is that you have your electricity go off at the time of Hadlakas Neros, so that you really need the light. Okay, and then you light the candles and then have it go back on again. He writes that. That's brought down in the name of Shlomo Zalman. Okay, all right. Okay, we're going to go now to Chaf Aleph. Im nizkar shelo irev kodem sudas shachris. So you remember again. You're now on Yontif, Erev Shabbos, and oivei, I didn't do an Eruv Tavshilin, and I need food for Shabbos. What do I do now? Yivashel harbe bekedera achas v'yoter l'Shabbos. So pour onto in one pot much more than you need, and then you're allowed to use it for Shabbos because we said that. You said the imhotir yoser imhotir. It's okay. The yesh I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. I'm sorry. Let me start again. I'm sorry. I'm mixing up. Go back to Chaf Aleph. I'm sorry. I'm jumping back and forth. Chaf Aleph. Im nizkar shelo irev kodem sudas shachris yevashel harbe bekedera achas v'yotir l'Shabbos. V'hu adin sheyochol leilech mi ba'od yom lecheder b'ner doluk l'chapes ezer davar v'yenichenu dolek ad alayla. In other words, you're allowed to light a candle on Yom Tov, and you didn't make an Eruv, so you're not going to be able to light Shabbos candles. What do I do for candle? What do I do for candles? So he says, light a candle and go into a dark room with that candle. So now I used the candle for Yom Tov, and then leave it over. And once you left it over, you're okay. Okay. The Yeshorman dafilu levashel kama kederos muter. Why? Remember, everybody agrees that you can do everything in one pot. What happens if I want to do it in multiple pots? You can do it kodem achilahu. If you remember, this was the solution. Since you haven't yet eaten, you can cook multiple pots as long as you're going to eat something from each pot. But that only works before you ate. It doesn't work after you ate. Okay, Chaf Aleph.
Sorry to disturb. Is it someone brought in on?
Yeah. I know about it.
Yeah?
Yes.
You know that?
Yes. Okay. What do we got here in the Mishnah Brura? Samach Vav. The Yanuchenu Dolek. You see Samach Vav. Again, this is the guy who forgot to make an Eruv Tavshilin. Okay. So, and then he remembers Shabbos Yontiv morning. The Yanuchenu Dolek. V'yochal achar kach l'taltala u'lanicho be'ezer makom she'yirtzeh. He's lighting it and taking it to a room where he needs to see something. After that, he can do whatever he wants with it. He can take it back to the living room. He can take it back anywhere. The Yeshorman, the Afilu, what was the Samaches? Afilu Bashal Kama Kederos. What happens if it was, for everybody agrees you can put all the food in one pot. What about multiple pots? So it says, yes, if you haven't eaten yet. Right? V'chein noagim ha'olam lehakel kedeazu v'ayin le'el b'simen tafkuf gimel, right? Where we saw on the tour, whether you're allowed to, where you can only do it on Yontif. If again, that's a din of what can I do on Yontif? Before you ate, you can cook multiple pots as long as you eat from each pot. Okay. Kama kederos ein ritzon alomer shemevakel minim chalukim bekama kederos litzorach Yontif. Be careful. You're not allowed to cook all kinds of different things for Yontif on Shabbos without an Eruv. Umar bebechol achas b'shvil Shabbos. Dezafilu l'dei rishona shari. Okay. In other words, if I need different things for Yom Tov, all right, of course I can cook each one separately and add. That's for sure okay. The problem arises when I'm cooking the same thing in 5 different pots because I want to have for Shabbos, but I don't really need it for Yom Tov because I have one big pot that I'm using. But if I'm going to cook broccoli and chicken and roast beef and potatoes in 5 different pots, without an Eruv, of course, in each pot I can add more than I need, and it'll be left over for Shabbos. Ela debola hosif sha'af im eno mevashlom ela bishvil Shabbos. V'rak kedei lahatir levashel ochel ktsas mikol achas v'yontov gamkin shavi. All right, but if I only need it for Shabbos, I don't need it for Yom Tov. So then, as long as I eat something from each one, I'm okay before my Seudah. Mutter hainu shebechol echad yemin chaluk. I'm sorry. V'hu sheyochal. I'm sorry. Mutter hainu shebechol echad yemin chaluk b'fnei atzmo din lov hafi min kar harama. The mashiyochal ktsas mikol kedera lo yochal litom me'achas. If it's, I'm saying like this, if it's all the same, and you just cook 5 pots and you take a little from each one, that's harama. That's obvious harama. We don't like that. Okay, but again, b'diavad we said if there's no choice. V'usha yochal kosav ataz v'hainu lekachila aval im ira shelo ochal klal mimin echad eino osir l'shabbos kiven shal kol panim b'shas habishul niskave. This is another example where if I ended up not doing it, as long as I intended to do it, I said I thought I'm going to have guests and they didn't come. What I cooked was okay. It doesn't retroactively make it a problem. Okay, let us. Yeah. Okay, so now Chav Beis, we have the Tnai. Im Niskar b'Yom Tov Rishon Shelo Irev. So Imu b'Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, there's no Eitzah. Eino Yochel Arev al Tnai, because it's all Yom Arev. Avalimi b'Yom Tov Shel Goluyos. All right, there's Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, and you remember on Thursday that you didn't make an Erev on Wednesday. So then, as we said, this was our Tnai. Yochel Arev b'Tnai, Ima Yom Kodesh, Ein Tzorch La'arev. Ima Yom Chol, Erev Zeh Yei Shara Lan Lafuye, because it's not really Yom Tov, so I'm doing it b'Chol. All right, and then Lamachar Ein Tzorch Lomar Klum, doesn't say anything the next day, because either he had an Erev or he doesn't need an Erev. Yeshomim De'i Les Le Midi Libashul Me'esmol Lo Mahani Tnai. Oh. In other words, your Tanai works if you do have something that you cooked on Wednesday. You didn't do your Erev on Wednesday, but on Thursday you have to have something you cooked on Wednesday so that you could say, now what I have today is going to be a continuation. But not everybody agrees with that. Let's see, Chaf, right. Let's see, Ayin Hey. Ayin Hey. V'yeshomim di'let le'ilei, v'naktinan kisvara rishona, that you don't need to, because you're really making your Eruv today. Your whole Eruv is today. And if I need the, so if I make the Eruv today because tomorrow is Yom Tov, then I'm cooking today for tomorrow, for Shabbos. And otherwise I don't need it. So therefore you don't really need to have anything cooked from yesterday. It's a chumrah that we don't need. Okay, Chaf Gimel, we're getting to the end, perfect timing. Im over b'meizid o shogeg ubishal kama kederos shelo l'tzorch Yom Tov muter l'ochlan b'Shabbos o b'chol, because we don't make a knas on the mezid, because we assume you won't do it again. The imherim levashal beis kederos l'tzorch hayom v'hotir achas l'tzorch machar. Then also lachila, we're more machmir on a harama than we are on an actual mezid. Because the mezid we assume you won't do it, but if you did it by harama, then that's a big opening to just forget Eruv all the time. I'll always do it by harama, and I don't need an Eruv anymore. Okay, let me just see. There are a couple of things Lamaisa in the later post game.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So I have herring in my refrigerator. I'm a herring fan. I eat from it periodically, once or twice a week. Would it be considered a superior food and better than an egg for the Tavshil for my Eruv Tavshilin, even though I didn't buy it for the purpose of using it as an Eruv Tavshilin?
Each one has an advantage. The egg was cooked specifically for Shabbos. The herring is more chashuv. And as long as you're designating it, we saw the designation works. So if you're taking that herring and saying, wow, this herring is the beginning of my Shabbos cooking, it works.
But I didn't cook it for Shabbos, right? I bought it cooked, and then when I bought it, I didn't buy it.
No, but that's exactly the din of the beans that were left over in the bottom of the pot that you didn't cook for Shabbos. Those beans were cooked for Yom Tov. And you left over some of the beans that was left over from the Yom Tov cooking, you can take that and designate it. That's explicit.
Yeah, but this herring I didn't even buy for Yom Tov. I bought it weeks ago.
But you didn't even buy it for Yom Tov. I hear.
That's like the dry gefilte fish we were talking about.
Yeah, I think it's still okay. Okay. What do I got here? I've got here, right. Okay, we saw this. Oh no, I'm sorry. There was another thing here. I'll read you the Mishnah I'll read you the Mishnah Brura in Shin Beis. This is Hilchos Shabbos. Okay? Yom Tov Shechal Erev Shabbos, muter lekapel talito levosh. The question is, can I do things on Yom Tov preparing for Shabbos? Can I fold my talis? Okay. Can I wash the dishes? Can I wash the dishes on Yom Tov for Shabbos?
That's a big one.
So there's no malacha there. Everything that Eruv Tavshilin is for malacha. The only problem with washing dishes is it's a tircha hachana. So therefore, we're more lenient and say, especially if you had an Eruv Tavshilin, maybe you didn't even need, but if you have an Eruv Tavshilin, certainly that's part that was included in the Eruv Tavshilin. I need to prepare for Shabbos. I'm allowed to prepare for Shabbos. So we paskin lemaisa, most poskim hold it's okay to wash the dishes, to set the table. If you made an Eruv Tavshilin, it's certainly okay because it's only a question of tira. Right. What else have I got here? Right. Okay. The Kaf HaChaim is the one who says that the only reason they used hard-boiled eggs is because they had no refrigeration. But he wants to tell you it's better to use meat or fish now that we have refrigeration. But again, the minhag olam is the chols of using hard-boiled eggs. Okay, there's something here from Nissen Karelitz that I wanted to show you. Oh, yes. The question of guests. What about guests that come? So therefore, Oreach, I'm going to read it to you from the Nissen Karelitz. Oreach o ben nasui hame'arich liyom tov. Ula Shabbos, Eitzel Harav Chama. So you have guests that are coming, your kids, your married kids, or yeshiva bacher that you're hosting. Einam yotzim be'eruv shel balabayit. Ve'efshar sheishafu be'eruv shel balabayit al yedei she'agbias eruv. But again, we say lamaisa, they can be partners in the eruv by baking a kinyan in it, and then they're part of the eruv because they now own part of the eruv. Okay? V'yehela mitzvahs eruv tavshilin bivracha. Because then when you make the eruv for them with the bracha, they're yotzei. Okay, and then he continues, what about in the hotels? This was asked to me. Somebody wrote me, how do they do eruv in a hotel? All right? How do you do an eruv in a hotel? So the answer is, okay, that they're all ochlin mibayat echad. Everybody's eating from the balabas of the hotel, the guy who owns the catering. All right? V'tavshil umachal echad lekulam. Balabayit osa eruv tavshilin echad avur kulam. The same thing in the yeshiva. Okay, the Rosh Yeshiva makes an eruv if the Rosh Yeshiva is going to be there for Yontif, like we're going to have, right? So Rabbi Schoonmaker asked me today if I want to make the Eruv Tavshilin right? And I said, well, I'm not going to be there on Yom Tov for Shabbos. All right, I'm going to go home. So he should certainly make it because he's going to be there on Yom Tov, and therefore any cooking, any preparation that happens on Yom Tov, he's mezaka for the guys. And therefore, he's going to make the Eruv Tavshilin, and therefore he's mizaka the guys. And in fact, it could be that he doesn't even need to be mizaka the guys because he's the balabas on the food. He owns the food, and he's saying, "I'm preparing the food for the guys." But certainly, if he's mizaka, and I told him he should be mizaka so that it works for all the guys. Okay, Rabosai, I'll just leave you one question. So I'm traveling next week. Next Wednesday there's no Chabura, nor the following Sunday or Wednesday. The question is Sunday, if there's a topic for a one-shot topic that I can do on Sunday, I'll do it. Otherwise, we'll just push off the Chabura until I get back. So you guys can think about it, but you got to let me know by tomorrow. Is there some one-off topic that I can discuss just tomorrow? Maybe we'll just hear from now if you have any thoughts.
I personally am preparing for a trial on Sunday, so I wouldn't mind not having shir.
Okay. Again, I think that we'll take a break now until it'll be let's say Sunday, and then the following Sunday, which is going to be 2 weeks from 2 weeks from Sunday. We'll stop out again. But I need to hear topics. We need to start up with a new topic. Okay.
Sorry, what date are we going to restart?
So it'll be let's see. I'm going to get back. Just a minute. I get back there to Israel on for Shabbos Shlach, which in Chutz La'aretz is going to be Baloscha. I'll be a parsha behind, so we would be looking at restarting on the 7th of June. The 7th of June. There's just one caveat. I have a doctor's appointment on the 7th of June. I should be back in time, so I should be on time. The plan is to start on the 7th of June. Okay, so let's stay in touch. While I'm traveling, you can be in touch with me, and we'll see. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, everybody have a Chag Sameach, a good Yontif, and we should only have Besoros Tovos.
Amen.
Amen. Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom.